You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. Enjoyment isn't the end game. It's the whole game, and at only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories, it's only worth it if you enjoy it. Calories, of course, Andy, very important as you go into the 4th of July holiday because you don't want to be fat while you're at the pool barbecues and all that kind of stuff. So a few things we want to get into. We're going to try to open the mailbag and answer a few questions. We've gotten some good ones over the course of the week, so we'll try to do that. The Suns and the Clippers, they wrapped up a sort of a fascinating series,
really entertaining series. I thought it was a really, especially
a blowout in Game 6, notwithstanding.
Right,
and especially there was a lot of stories.
Well, especially when you take into account too, like Kawhi Leonard missing the entirety of it, Chris Paul being unavailable for some of it. Like it could have been a real slog from an entertainment standpoint, and by and large, I found it really fun.
There was a ton going on. And so, we're going to take a look at that series, but also really look at the Clippers now, because at least in my mind, Andy, there's a sort of a Spiderman meme going on between the Lakers and the Clippers in terms of how each team is looking at their offseason. So we'll do that probably in our second segment. But in our first, Andy, I gotta wish you something. I apologize. I didn't get you a card, but I want to wish you a happy LeBronniversary.
Oh, thank you.
I know. The greeting card industry is they ruin everything and commercialize it. And I don't want LeBronniversary spoiled, but for people who don't remember, July 1st, 2018, that was the day the news broke, thanks to Woj, that LeBron James would be signing with the Lakers, Andy, ending our long national nightmare. You look back on it, though, and obviously the Lakers they've won a title, and the assumption is, the success didn't come right away, but the assumption would be that the success would come. The impact that LeBron has had, when people talk, Lakers fans especially are constantly talking about legacy and where guys fit. There have been so many good players, and who gets a statue and who doesn't, who is in the rafters and who isn't, and who has their jersey retired and all that stuff. And the reason that LeBron, I think, will have all of that stuff when it's all said and done, particularly if he wins a second title, is the impact that choice had of LeBron coming to LA resurrected this franchise. If he chooses not to come to LA, if he goes somewhere else, whatever it is, I don't know where they are. And we'll have that conversation before we're done here. But like that moment put the Lakers back on the map in a meaningful way and made them relevant again, that now they have Anthony Davis and presumably will be able to fill that second star role again when LeBron retires. That's how this whole thing is set up to do. That doesn't happen if he doesn't show up.
Yeah, they got lucky in the sense that LeBron was at a stage in his career where location was more important than the current state of the Lakers. Like, as much as the idea of being a part of this storied franchise with this type of history, I'm sure did appeal to LeBron, and I'm sure he, did the calculus in his mind of what it would mean to be at the center of resurrecting this thing. Let's be honest. If LeBron was in his prime and not near a place where he's thinking about post-career and he's already having his entertainment.
Right. He has
he's already here.
His family is already in
all that. He's already in the post-retirement career while active. Like, that's how big he is in all these different spaces. So it was fortunate that he was, in terms of chronologically with his career, there. Because I can promise you that if LeBron was 31, he doesn't make this decision. Not in a million.
No, I don't think so. But it's funny. Like first of all, you didn't actually hear me give the Lakers a lot of credit for this happening, but it did. I mean, it was something that did happen. But it's not. Nothing is guaranteed. Like this weekend, the 4th of July weekend, is the anniversary as well of the news breaking in 2012 that Steve Nash was going to come to the Lakers in a sign and trade. And at the time, this was like, okay, here we go. Like the Lakers are going to get, thing here. They'll probably get Dwight Howard, which they eventually did, and all that. And it's going to be Nash, and it's going to be Gasol and Kobe and Dwight. And it's like, Sports
Meta
Illustrated
World
covers.
Peace, Antoine Jameson, Steve Blake, like Jody.
It's
Meeks.
a wrap. Yeah. As Max Kellerman would say, that's a wrap.
It
wasn't, obviously.
No, it was not a wrap. And we learned very quickly, game 2 of that season, the leg collision of Damian Lillard and Steve Nash, it was going to be anything but a wrap. You had the firing of Mike Brown 5 games in. You had the tension between Kobe and Dwight, all the way leading up to Kobe's Achilles and all the different injuries. It was an absolute flippin' disaster.
And honestly, when we were talking about this before we started recording, like that first year pre-AD trade was rough. I mean, the Lakers were if LeBron doesn't get hurt on Christmas against the Warriors, the Lakers will make the playoffs. I don't doubt that for a second. They were, in the top 8 before. I think top 4, I think, at that point. And they would have made the playoffs. I don't think they want to win a title, but they're in. So I mean, like that part of the rehab was going okay. But even then, like LeBron suffers a really important injury the first year that he's here. Like obviously, that's why, when if people ask me, is it worth it to give up all the young players? Is it worth it to sign LeBron? Is it worth it to go into cap hell or whatever? If you win one title and then you have to suffer for it for 2 or 3 seasons, absolutely it is, because it's so hard to win. Look at the Bucks. They maybe they beat Atlanta without Giannis. Let's say Giannis can't finish and play in the finals if they advance. Like you get this far and Giannis can't play in the finals, and it's like, what do you do? So like if you win one, it justifies everything that it took to get that one title. I think fans are insane to question that.
Well, I think the perspective of Laker fans can be pretty warped because they are entitled. And I say this because there's a reason they're entitled. When you have 17 championships and you look at, say, the situation where Phil Jackson joined the team in 2000 and they instantly win a championship that becomes the first of 3, or, after what constituted, in Laker fans' minds, down seasons, hell, when basically it's first round and you're out, which is obviously below the standards of what you want in Kobe's prime. But for a lot of franchises, franchises, that ain't hell. Then you turn around, you get Pau Gasol in a trade nobody sees coming. You go to the finals, then you win 2 championships the next 2 years. And then you have Showtime, 5 championships in that era. Like your perspective can get really warped about just how damn hard this is. Winning championships is winning, period. Like this is something we're going to end up talking about, I know, later in the show. Winning, period, in the NBA at a consistent level is hard, regardless of whether you win a championship or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard.
And I will say this, and we'll break out of this, but like the entitlement is part of the fun.
Oh,
That's one of the great joys of, participating in Lakers fandom and, interacting with them. Like, as I highly encourage all Lakers fans to lean in as hard as they possibly can to the entitlement, because that is a massive portion of the fun.
Brian, I am a huge Laker fan. I'm not saying this to disparage anybody.
No.
I'm just being honest.
Absolutely.
I don't need to hide this side of it. It is what it is.
It's fun. All right, let's play the what if game, because we always look back fondly at the kids. What would have happened, do you think? How good would the Lakers have become if they had just kept going? We'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season's in full swing. You can track all the action at BetOnline. This week, as always, tons of sports action on the go. Get all the latest news, odds, info for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, UFC, MMA. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop, your mobile device. Check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, contest information. Don't sit on the sideline anymore. This is your chance to get into the game as teams remain neck deep in the playoffs. Head to the website, use your mobile device, sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using the promo code Locked On. 50% welcome bonus. That is a sweet way of saying hello. Bet online, your online sportsbook experts.
Okay, there is a parallel universe somewhere in which LeBron James doesn't come to Los Angeles. The Lakers aren't trying to make room for Paul George and all that other stuff, and they end up with all this this roster of very young players, many of whom have grown into excellent NBA players. So let's say this, with the exception of D'Angelo Russell, who was moved out of Los Angeles to make room for Magic Johnson's disgust.
Felt like Magic made up his mind pretty quickly on that one.
I don't like you, and you're going. And in fairness, it was to draft Lonzo and all that stuff. Fine. I mean, at the time, D'Angelo, who's turned into a good NBA player, had some maturity issues, and remains an imperfect player.
This was not really, I think, the ideal market for D'Angelo then.
No, I don't think so. But that leaves you, because don't forget, like they moved Randall out. They renounced Randall, which is one of my favorite things to renounce. I renounce you. We're not even letting you go. We renounce you. It's very active. I like it. It's a jazz singer. And so
then they sent him off to an evil forest where he had to live for the rest of his life.
That's right. Randall,
I can't believe the CBA allows it, but
it's a weird wrinkle.
It was an oversight by Chris Paul.
Nance,
Lonzo,
and then like the crew that they traded for, so Lonzo, Ingram,
Josh
Hart. That's a pretty good NBA team.
Yeah.
Especially like the way that Randall is developed. And you and I have long held real estate on Randall Island.
Oh, yeah.
How good, though, do you think? Because when you asked me this question before, my quick answer was, well, they're the Pelicans, because the Pelicans have all of those guys that the Lakers traded. But that's not really it either, because they also had Nance and they also had Clarkson, and who's turned into a pretty good player. And obviously in the real world, you kind of can't keep all of those guys. No. But let's just pretend they could. Like, how good would that team have been? Where are they in this Western Conference?
A core of those guys that we think are the best.
Yeah.
Some combination of it. I think they could have been good. There's a big question in this, Brian, that would need to be addressed in a way that is just not the way the Lakers operate as an organization. They would have had to have been truly committed to building from the ground up and really developing these players.
Right. And being content with the results. Like, this is our homegrown team and this is how we're going to do it. And yeah.
Because you and I, Randall and Ingram have been the two best players, I think by a pretty significant margin in that group. I mean, I think all of them have been successful in varying degrees. Like Larry Nance Jr., I would love to see that guy on a winning team because he's become a really good role player.
Yeah, absolutely. But Nance, look at this, that supporting group of guys. And we've talked about it all the time. Like, how good you are 4 through 9 is critically important to winning a title, particularly now. There's I forget who wrote it, but there's a great feature on ESPN.com right now about the incredible value of depth. I think it's on ESPN. I haven't read it. I just have it bookmarked. This season, next season, with your 9th, 10th, 11th players matter a lot. So like those dead spots the Lakers had, we talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, like the Jared Dudley spot matters more now than it used to. You can have one of those guys. You can't have multiple dead spots on a roster. But you look back at it, like Nance, Clarkson, Hart, Lonzo, and all of that whole crop of guys, none of them is going to have a career, if they stay healthy, that's less than a decade. Right. They're all going to play more than a decade in the league.
And in the meantime, Julius Randle and Brandon Ingram have turned into all-star caliber players. In Randle's case, he was all-NBA this season. And you and I both thought, even then, that they had the potential to become players like that. But the organization would have had to be patient, and they would have had to be committed to their development, as opposed to maybe liking them sincerely as players, but first and foremost, seeing them as assets.
Yes.
And even though young players are always going to be assets in this league, if you have the opportunity to get a superstar, I mean, that's just the way things work.
Of course.
But there's a difference, though, in recognizing that they can be assets and seeing them first and foremost as potential assets. And I think the Lakers always saw these guys. Oh, and by the way, we're forgetting Kuzma, who's still on the team.
Who's still here. Correct.
Right. Kyle Kuzma is still part of this team, just to make sure that we don't overlook
can
that.
We also,
that
can we, in this world, can we also just erase the Mike Muscala trade and let us, and so we still have Zoo?
No, you know what? I'm going to say that doesn't count because that happened with LeBron there. Okay. Like I don't, and that trade really had nothing to do with LeBron. So I feel like Zubats sort of ends up getting sacrificed.
Maybe it's just me wanting the erasure of that moment, which goes down as one of the worst trades of all time.
Yeah, I mean the Clippers are never going to match the Lakers in terms of ring count, banner count, all that stuff. At least
they didn't trade Ivica Zubats for Mike Muscala.
They're always going to have bragging rights on that one.
I feel like eventually, we live in an NBA where you need legitimate superstars, probably two, to be something that wins, and probably because it's LA, fan patience would have run out with this. There's no question.
But say like
it's a fun, but that is your Lonzo, Randall, Ingram, find a center,
with a different coach. I think they need a different coach. Frankly, a better coach than Luke Walton. Like maybe if you have Frank Vogel.
That's a fun team. That is a really fun team to watch.
You and I used to talk about this all the time. We really liked that core. Like we liked those guys personally. Like we thought there really wasn't a bad guy in the bunch, but we also thought they were really fun to watch. And I when we wrote regularly for The Athletic, I wrote a piece actually about like the idea that there's always going to be a part of me that wonders what would have been if the Lakers had been willing to just cultivate this group. Right. And obviously they didn't make the wrong mistake. You won a championship and you've got two legitimate top 5 players on your roster now. Like there's no regrets about this, but there could have been something really enjoyable and in a lot of ways really satisfying, even if you don't win a championship, because all those guys would have been your guys,
yeah.
As a fan,
you know what? At the very least, somebody out there and do this and play the results. Do a 2K season with that, and let us know how it goes.
Yeah,
let us know where they finish.
Let us know, Brian. Do they get to the finals? Because today, on the road to the finals, our NBA playoff coverage brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. At 2.6 carbs, 95 calories, we can all enjoy the games a little more this season.
Real finals, virtual finals, they all count for the purposes of that read.
Yes.
All right, let's look at the Western Conference Finals, which just wrapped up on Thursday night. And like I said, I think the Lakers and Clippers are in very similar spots this summer and will have virtually the same kinds of concerns going into next year as we still, Andy, once again, wait for the Lakers versus the Clippers in the playoffs. We'll do that next. I want to let you know first that Locked On Lakers, it's brought to you by Built Bar. If you're like me, you're always on the move. You got the kids going to school or camp, whatever it might be. You try to sneak a workout in here or there. You're constantly hungry. You're constantly fighting the need to snack on something. And if you're like me, you don't have a lot of willpower. That means you give in. So you need something with protein, but that's low in sugar and calories and tastes really good. So it satisfies your sweet tooth and all that. That's Built Bar. The improved Built Bar, Andy, it's even more delicious than before. They've got 18 flavors, including 6 new ones. 18 flavors.
They have one more flavor than the Lakers have championships.
That's what the Lakers are chasing. People think they're chasing the Celtics. They're not. They're chasing Built Bar. People don't realize that the bars, they're coated in 100% real chocolate. That people do realize that, and they're soft, they're chewy, which is a rare thing in a protein bar. Go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your next order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. What do you want to do first with this? Because, like I said, I think the comparison between the two teams is fascinating. But you want to do a quick look at that series, because there was a lot going on there, from the rehab of Paul George to I guess the vindication or whatever of Chris Paul, but doing it in a way that really pissed people off.
Well, okay.
It's got to be like the most unpopular happy moment in like the history. Like never have people wanted to be happier for a guy they struggled to be happier for than Chris Paul after Game 6.
Well, okay. To begin with Paul George, because I really do think this guy had an excellent playoff redemption in terms of the way he's been seen. I think in certain ways accurately, in certain ways you're revealing that you don't remember what he did in Indiana because he was really, really
or
good.
That you just don't want to like the guy
right.
because he didn't come to the Lakers because
sure.
he doesn't. He has the unique ability to say to mean the right thing and say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
It's really unprecedented in NBA history.
But what Paul George, though, did for the Clippers, once Kawhi Leonard went down and needing to become the primary option for this team, like the type of player that everybody says Paul George is not capable of being, and to end up being able to will out that second round win over Denver and then be able to push the Suns, who they've been really good all year and they've been really good in these playoffs, to 6 largely really hard-fought games. And for Paul George, it wasn't always perfect in terms of efficiency and the percentages from the field and stuff. But
the missed free throws, he was being asked to do everything.
The minutes that he was logging were insane. The responsibility was off the charts. And he acquitted himself extremely well. And this is a guy that, again, for all of his foot and mouth syndrome, he's really never done anything to anybody. I think people have long since forgotten. He used to be one of the most sympathetic players in the league because of that injury,
leg injury, right?
And also, too, these playoffs are a reminder of how much aggravation Paul George could have spared himself by just giving himself a bad nickname, as opposed to maybe the worst in NBA
like calling
history.
himself Vino, like that level of a bad nickname.
If he had just been like Paul the Tall, like, hey, I'm 6'8", I'm tall, or like Paul the Wall, which doesn't make sense. Like,
he's an excellent defender. He's Paul the Wall,
Georgie the Orgy. Like, this is gonna be an orgy of points in this game. Like, those are terrible nicknames. They're still better than playoff.
I'm intrigued by Georgie the Orgy. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm not crossing that off the whiteboard yet. It's unique,
right? I mean, it's worth focus grouping. You're saying, maybe out in the valley, if nothing else.
I mean,
but like,
he is from Palmdale. Who knows what they do out there?
I don't think they get down the same way they do in the valley. At least, like, I've never heard that Paul Thomas Anderson considered basing Boogie Nights in Palmdale.
Right.
But either way, though, like, that nickname in and of itself created so much slander for Paul George that I did start noticing.
Andy, it's a terrible nickname, even if he crushes it in the playoffs. It's still a bad nickname. It's still cheesy and dumb.
But I started noticing some sentiment turning for Paul George, and I'm glad to see that, because even though I still don't think he is capable of being the number one option on a team that really could win a championship. Like, there are only a handful of players that are truly that good, and I don't think Paul George is one of them. What I do think we saw in these playoffs that speak well of him is when he is put in the position when he has no choice other than to be that guy, it brings out the best in him, as opposed to other players that maybe that type of pressure, hurts.
I mean, I will say this. I think I think you would agree, we need to have more space in our sports. We're getting better about it. We really are, compared to like 5-10 years ago. I think we really are getting better about it. We need to have more space in our acceptance and our praise spectrum for really good, like near elite or whatever, however you want to praise guys or whatever. Like, I was watching Wimbledon this afternoon, and it occurred to me, like, there are dudes out here who are like the 140th ranked men's tennis player in the world. Like, you get bounced in the first round, second round of Wimbledon, whatever it is. And they're like, oh, that guy's, whatever. He's not that good. He's the 140th ranked player in the world. He's the 140th ranked player. You need to appreciate like how staggering. So like Paul George is one of the 25, 15, 20, 25 best basketball players on planet Earth. Okay, he's not perfect. He's extraordinarily good. And whether it's Paul George, whether it's Chris Paul,
that's where I wanted to go next.
Right. And I think they're related. We need to have more space in how we appreciate players, even if they aren't Jordan. And like I said, I think we're getting better at it. I know personally, I am far more interested in seeing people succeed than I am in the story of failure, which can be very compelling, but it's just not for me. And CP3, I think, is a great example of that.
Yeah. What he's doing right now, I mean, obviously he's not doing it alone. He has a terrific supporting cast. He's got an all NBA caliber player with him in Devin Booker. DeAndre Ayton has had a
ascending
incredible
in a big
coming
way.
out party. It's a really well-constructed team, but he is still a huge part of what they do. And he is the undisputed closer of that team this far into his career. And, Chris Paul, I know he can be aesthetically very unpleasing in the way he goes about
that flop against Boogie in Game 6 was
right.
Egregious.
Look,
I mean, I love CP, but that was
so do I.
That was egregious. But I also think I enjoy watching Harden. I'm apparently a glutton for punishment.
Well, I mean, look, CP, what you were talking about with that flop, it's aggravating and it's also totally typical.
Oh yeah, it was incredibly on brand. I wasn't surprised by it.
That's more rule than exception.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Chris Paul aesthetically that can rub people the wrong way in ways that I understand. I know that there have been times in his career where he's grated on people, but the bottom line is that dude wins in the most literal way. He's a winner. Like I just looked up, I didn't realize this. He's 16 years into his career. He's been to the playoffs 13 of the 16 seasons he's been in his career, 11 of which are consecutive.
That's impressive.
Like, that's winning, man.
You have to respect that. You have to respect that. Even if you don't have a
championship, that's winning. Like, when Chris Paul joins your team will get demonstratively better.
Yeah,
we know that. And too, like, I would recommend people listen to the Low Post, the one that just came out today, part of it with Kevin Arnovitz, because they were talking about Chris Paul. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Zach Lowe laid out some of Chris Paul's playoffs, and in particular, fourth quarter playoff numbers. They are staggeringly great. Mm-hmm. So yes, he's had a couple high-profile playoff meltdowns. Most great players have.
If you get to the playoffs 13 times in 16 years, they're not all going to be good. Right.
But man, that dude wins. And to your point earlier, I think we just need to have more appreciation for winning in general, because it's hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
Let's and speaking of that, let's do real quick. And we'll save the mailbag either for Locked On Lakers on YouTube, or we can come back to it next week after the holiday. Please keep sending those questions at Cam Brothers, KamenetskyBrothers@gmail.com.
We will do a
5-star review on iTunes, but we'll one way or another, we're going to get to them. And we thank you for that. But the Lakers and Clippers, I think, are in a very similar situation. What did the Clippers do to get better? Well, okay, I think you can use a little bit of help at the point guard position, just like last year. Like, they need a little help there. They could upgrade there. They have some positional stuff they can do. The Lakers can need some shooting. They could use another ball handler, depending on, even with Schroeder. Like, they have some needs. Ultimately, the Lakers look at this season and go, if AD and LeBron are healthy, we're probably still playing, and we take our chances with that. The Clippers look at it and go, if Kawhi doesn't get hurt, we're probably in the finals, probably have a chance to win the whole thing. And, I'm assuming Kawhi comes back. I think he will. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. I think we're looking at two teams that are in very similar places, sort of a very Spiderman meme kind of thing that they're going through. Not that there's not room for improvement with both, but I don't think either team looks at it like they got to make a major shakeup, because you can easily say, if we're healthy, we're in the finals.
Yeah, except for one really big difference. Both of these teams are in their current positions because they drastically mortgage their futures. Mm-hmm. The Lakers have already had that paid off. Like, whatever happens from here. But I'm saying,
totally agree with that.
But this matters, though, in terms of the way you determine what each team may do. because the Clippers have to win a championship for all of this to have been worth it. Like it's great that they finally broke the Western Conference Finals ceiling. Like that's fantastic. But for this to have been worth it, I'm sorry, for this to have been, frankly, not a failure, they have to win a championship. Like you have to get to
a couple finals.
You got to get to the finals. So they start looking at what they have right now, and Kawhi Leonard, who gets hurt a lot, and Paul George, who has shown he can do some good things in the playoffs, but you wonder what can happen if he's left as the number one option and maybe doesn't have the correct supporting cast around him. There may be more of a desperation for the Clippers to do something that the Lakers won't have, because as much as they want to keep winning, and obviously Rob Pelinka has work to do in front of him, just ask Magic. The difference is, though, they've already paid off their decisions.
I agree with that. But if the Clippers don't panic, if the Clippers don't freak out, and actually be honest, they have very limited capacity to panic, because they're locked in probably worse than the Lakers are in terms of the roster and flexibility and what they're able to do. I just say, like, they are both in a very similar position. All right, so we'll get to the mailbag stuff. We'll get to more Locked On Lakers on Twitter.
Maybe we'll just do an all mailbag episode.
We should. We'll do that, and we can do some more of that on YouTube as well. Really thank everybody for continuing to subscribe to that. It's really great for the show and all that. So we appreciate it, and hope everybody has a great 4th
Spotify Green Room, our chat, 11 a.m. Pacific today. Be there today, 11 a.m. Pacific special time. We normally go at noon. This week, it's going to be 11 a.m. Pacific time.
Very good. Have a great holiday weekend.